Namaste, this is Aditya and welcome to Shankar Martech channel. In this video, I am going to cover the end-to-end flow of AEM single page applications. I thought of covering the entire flow in one video so that there will not be any confusion for you to find the continuation videos. So this video might go a bit lengthier. I hope you will stay with me till the end. If you have any further questions, please leave out all those questions in the comment box so that I'll see them and do one or more two videos as a follow-up for this video. If you are liking my videos, please like, share and subscribe to my channel. Let's get started with the presentation. So first let me give an overview on what we are going to cover today. Okay, so there'll be a developer. Okay, he will install this Angular SPA maybe in his local. Okay, then the AngularJS project, which is part of the UI frontend, developer will build that project. And then whenever we build the Angular project, the output of that Angular project will be a simple JS file. Okay, so the Angular coding, everything will do it in the TS, right? But the output of it will be a simple JS file. So that JS file will be pushed as part of the Clientlibs into the AEM folders. Okay, so that is the first thing which will happen. So once the build happens, this AngularJS files will go into the AEM and get stored as a Clientlibs. So whenever a user hits a URL, that URL passes through this dispatcher and then it goes to the publish instance. And then from the publish instance, a page will be served. And on that page, you will have a link to this JS file which is generated as an output of this Angular project. Okay, and since that JS file is served to the browser, in the browser the Angular project gets loaded and then the single page application will run on the client's browser. Okay, so this is the flow which we are going to discuss in detail in this video. Okay, so first let's cover the basic things. So to install the Angular project in your local, you need to run this maven command. So this will download the maven archetype of the Angular project into your local. Okay, so we will specify here saying that Frontend module equal to Angular. So it downloads the Angular project. Okay, if you mention this as React, it will download the React project. Okay, so I am taking the Angular as an example in this video, but the flow should remain same for both Angular and React. Okay, so this is the command I have run. So once this command is run, you should be able to see this Angular project which is getting installed here. Okay, so here I have given the Angular demo as my name, title, app title. So whatever app title you give, the same name, this project will get created and you should be able to see these files. Okay, so then you should be able to open this file and it should look something like this. So the first issue which you might face is once this page opens, you will not see any of the components which get added here. So a blank page will open. Okay, so then you try to open this as a publish mode in view as publish. Then also it will throw some error and ultimately nothing gets open once you install the project. Okay, so whenever that blank page scenario happens, the first thing which you should do is go to the system console and check if all your bundles are up and running. So if any of those bundles are not active and they just remain in the install state, then it means that there is some dependencies which are missing. Okay, it usually happens because you have used the latest version here or the wrong version here when compared to the AEM version which you are using. Okay, currently I am using 6.5.15 in my local and for that only 39 worked for me. So I installed the latest version and I also had the blank page issues. So if you have the similar issues, then try to downgrade this archetype version and try to see if it fixes the issue for you. Okay, so anytime, not only in Angular SPA, even in the regular AEM projects, whenever you see the blank screen, it means that there is some issue with the dependencies. So you should immediately go and check the system console. Okay, so once this got sorted out and if you are able to see the Angular page here, then we can follow up with our flow. So the first thing which we will discuss about is the project structure. Okay, so here is the main project folder and inside that project folder you will be able to see the core, UI apps. All this is same as the regular AEM project, but in the front end you will be able to see the Angular related stuff here. If you install it as a normal AEM in the front end, you will not be able to see any of the Angular stuff. But since you have installed it saying the front end equal to Angular in this Maven project, the project which gets installed will get loaded with the Angular stuff. Okay, so you will be able to see something like this in your UI front end. So inside this SRC folder, you will be able to see the app, and inside the app you will have all the components. So we'll come to this later, but first we'll talk about the build process, how it happens. Okay, so whenever the build happens, a static file of JS, like all these components, whatever are there as part of this app, right? This entire application will get compiled into a static JavaScript file, and those static JavaScript files will be loaded into this dist folder. Okay, so once the compilation is done, once the build process is complete, the Angular will go through all this code and it will compile all those things into a dist folder like this here. Okay, so all the static files, these are the static files which we want to move it into the AEM for the Angular project to load into AEM. Okay, so that's the thing which we are going to discuss now. Okay, so how is that build process happening? So to execute the build, we will type a command which is npm run build, like this. So this will trigger the build. So whenever you say npm run, then what happens is it will come into this package.json, and all the script files will be defined here. So whenever you run the command build, what should happen is defined here. So it will go into this package.json file and it will look for this build command, and it will execute all these commands in sequence. Okay, so first it executes ng-lint. So lint is just like it will validate all our code, and all the coding standards will be mentioned in this lint. So it will parse through our code, and if there are any misses in the coding standards, it will alert us. So this is the first process which is happening. Then what happens is ng build will trigger with this configuration. Configuration is equal to AEM develop, and we have given this clientlib. So this clientlib command is the one which is responsible for moving all these files in the dist folder, into AEM clientlibs folder. Okay, so what is this clientlib? Actually, this is not Angular specific. This is a AEM specific library. Okay, if you see in the dependencies, right, somewhere here in the dependency, yeah, this is the one. So you have AEM clientlib generator, right? So this AEM clientlib generator is the one which might be having this clientlib command in it, or clientlib script in it. So what should happen whenever there is a clientlib in the command, that this might be defining. We don't know whatever is the internal process, but we can assume that seeing the name of this library, we can assume that this clientlib might be part of this. Okay, so ultimately what happens is it will go into this dist folder, and then it will move everything into the clientlib folder. But how does the Angular know, or even this library know that where do we check for this folder, right? Always it may not be dist, right? So what is the source folder and what is the destination into which we need to move? So how does it check? So to check that, we have something called as clientlib.config.js. So now it comes to clientlib.config.js, and here we define what is a build directory. Okay, so here we gave dist, right? So we are saying the source directory is dist. So whatever is there in this dist, you copy that. This is the source directory, and then we are giving the clientlib directory. So this is a path join, and we gave UI apps src main content jcr root apps angular demo and clientlibs. So it goes to this path UI apps src jcr root clientlibs. So it will come here, and then here we are specifying the name, right? Libs name as clientlib angular. So this is the clientlib angular folder, and into this folder it will move all those JS files, resource files, and CSS files also if there are any. So all the configuration as to what is the source folder, what is the destination, and how it has to move, everything is defined here in this clientlib.config.js file. So this clientlib.config.js file is read by this clientlib script, which might be part of this AEM clientlib generator. Okay, so this is how the code gets executed, and it will come into once the build happens, the static files will come into the dist folder, and once this clientlib executes, the entire JS files and CSS files which are part of the dist folder will then get copied into this UI apps Clientlibs folder. Okay, so this is the build flow. So since the build flow is clarified, let's come back to this user flow. So whenever the user hits the URL, then how is the Angular getting loaded? Okay, so that process we'll see. So generally the people who worked in the Angular will have a question, right? Whether whenever the URL is typed, the routing, is it handled by the AEM or is it handled by Angular? Because in the Angular also we define routes, right? So which part of it is handling the routes? So the answer to that question is, first always AEM will come into the picture. Okay, the first control goes to AEM. So it comes to the dispatcher and it will find for the page you are requesting, and the page path will be just as the AEM page path. It starts with /content and /home and so on and so forth. So it might look something like this, right? Content Angular demo USEN home.html. So it might look something like this. So with the same path, it first hits the dispatcher, and if the static page is there cached in the dispatcher, it gets served. So what will be there as part of this page? Okay, so it is the same thing as you see in the Angular, right? It will be an empty file, empty HTML file, because in the Angular everything is JavaScript, right? So whatever is this empty file, so you don't see any of the page rendered here. So it just loads the script like this here, right? Clientlib angular.js, it loads the script, and this script will get sent back into the client. So it will not have any of the HTML content in it. Okay, so this is how the JavaScript, which is Angular related JavaScript, will come back to the client browser and it will get loaded. So the main part to note here is AEM is sending back the page, but it is just an empty page as you generally see it in the Angular projects. Okay, and that page contains the script reference to the Angular JS file, and that's how the Angular project will get loaded on the client's browser. And from there on, whatever routing happens, the Angular will take care of it. Okay, so now let's see how Angular will handle the routing. Okay, so till now we have seen, if this is the URL, what AEM has done, what is a part of the AEM, that we have seen till here. Now for the same URL, what will be the part in Angular, or what will happen in Angular, that we are going to see now. So once the Angular project is loaded, it will go into this Angular app, and it starts with the app module. Okay, in Angular we know that Angular is based on the modular structure, and app module is the root module. It is like a main in the C program. The control starts from here. Okay, first the root module gets loaded, and once the root module gets loaded, all other modules get loaded internally. Okay, so in the root module we have a bunch of imports like this. So all these imports are required for the AEM project to start, or AEM SPA project to start. Okay, so all the required modules will get loaded in this root module. Okay, if you see here in the root module itself, we have something called as import components. Okay, so this import components is where the component mapping between the AEM to SPA is happening. Okay, so it is loaded in the root module. So we'll come to this flow later, but let's see how the bootstrapping happens. So bootstrapping means, how does the Angular project start? It first does all these imports, and then it will go to this bootstrap, and whatever is the bootstrap component, like for example here app component, right? So the control goes then to this app component. Okay, so this is how the regular Angular flow works, and even in the AEM SPA this flow holds good. Okay, so if you see here in this, we are loading the app routing module. So once this app routing module is imported into the AEM memory, then the control flows into this app routing module. So app routing module is here, right? This is the app routing module. Okay, so the control comes here. So it will come to this ng module, and then here it will see this import. So whoever knows this Angular flow, right, they will be able to relate to this flow very easily. Okay, so it comes to this ng module and it will see this import and it will see this route module dot for routes and we pass this routes. Okay, so this is how the route configuration gets loaded, right? So then the control flows into this routes, right? So this is the routes which we are passing. It's a global variable. So all these routes will get loaded and it will get executed into this route module. So in this routes, what happens? We are doing a matcher, and in the matcher we are giving the AEM page matcher as a function. Okay, so this is the function which matches the incoming URL. So the incoming URL is this one, right? So this AEM page matcher will check some conditions if there is a page match or not. Okay, so if you see above, this is the function AEM page matcher. Okay, so this is the function which we are defining. Here we are checking if the URL is not null or if it has some length or not. Okay, so as long as URL has some length or if it is not null, then we are assuming that it is a match, means it is a valid URL and it can be consumed. So this returns JSON structure, and here we have two parameters, consumed and post params. As part of the consume, you will send the URL. What is this URL? This URL is nothing but a URL segment. It is an array. So what will this array have? So it will have something like content, comma, Angular demo, comma, US, comma, en, comma, home. That will be the array. Okay, so wherever you have slash here, instead of slash, it gets split into a comma, and that will be the array which it holds. Okay, which this URL segment holds. And if that array is not null or it has some length, then it returns this. And in the consumed, you are passing the entire array, this URL segment array. And then in the post params, what you pass is the last one. Like for example, in this case, it will pass the home. So it will set the home as this path in the post params, and it will return this object which will come here. So then what happens is it goes to this resolve. Okay, in this resolve, you are giving the path and you mention here a service, AEM page data resolver service. So this is the service which is responsible to connect to this page. Okay, this page, whatever you are seeing here, this is the service. This is the service which is responsible to connect to this page, and it will get this entire page structure or like whatever components are added onto this page, right? All these components and this entire page structure, it will get it as a JSON into this. Okay, so this is the service which is doing all that. So it is responsible to do an API call to AEM, and then AEM will return a JSON, and that JSON will contain this entire page structure as a JSON. Okay, so that we will say it as a model.json, to which we will come at the later point. So here just understand the overall flow. Okay, so this AEM page data resolver is what is giving the API call to this AEM, and that's how AEM will send the data to this AEM page data resolver. And then the control flows to this component, which is the page component. Okay, so then this page component is what gets loaded. Okay, if you see these components here, so we have something called as page, and this is the page component, right? So these page components will get opened, and this is how the control flows into here. So once you see here in this constructor of this page component module, what we are doing is we are calling this model manager service. Okay, and we are getting the data. So this model manager service again is a AEM service. So what it does is the model which is written, the JSON model which is written by this AEM. So this component will read that, and it will parse that entire JSON structure. It will identify the components, and then it will try to render these components onto the page. Okay, so however, in whatever order you have added the components here, right, on the AEM, those will be passed as a JSON to this HTML file, and in this tag which is AEM page. So this is again a AEM tag, AEM defined tag. So what it does is it will loop through all that JSON structure, and it will try to load all these components here. So once these components are loaded, then the component mapping happens. Okay, So let's stop till here and let's first try to understand what is this model.json and how the structure of it looks like. Okay, so then we'll better understand how the mapping happens. Okay, so let's come back here, and if I just view it in the publish mode, so actually I'm viewing it in the publish mode. So if I just duplicate this, and here instead of .html, if I give .model.json, then I will get the JSON structure of this entire page. Let's copy this entire JSON and let's put it into the JSON parser. Okay, so this is the parsed JSON, so it is just structuring the JSON for us. So let's put it into the notepad and let's try to analyze. So in the notepad, if I change the language to the JSON in the notepad++, so I can see this with the highlighted things. Okay, so this is our JSON structure now. So what is all there in this JSON structure? If we try to analyze this, we have something called as component resource type. So this is the overview, right, which is given by the AEM to Angular as to what all components are loaded as part of this page. Okay, so these are all the components which are there as part of this page. That is what this component resource type is telling. What all components are loaded as part of this page. Then we have something called as items folder at the root level. So inside the items, we have the root and we have the column count. Okay, so this column count is the number of grids which we have, right? If we are talking about the flexbox, right, we have the number of grids, right? How many grids are there? It's a 12 grid, 6 grid. So like that, it gives the number of grids. Then it is also giving the grid class names. What class names have to be applied? So that will also be passed as part of the JSON. So then it is giving the column classes names. Okay, so these are the components which are at the high level, which are placed as part of the root. That is what it is saying. So you have experience fragment header, responsive grid, and then experience fragment footer. Okay, so these are the three components which are there at the root level. So that's what is mentioned here. Then you come to the allowed components. So this allowed components is equal to like for example, if you click on this, right, which is part of this layout container, if you click on here, you have this plus icon. So if you open this, what are all allowed here, right? So this is what is being displayed here as part of the allowed components. Okay, so you are allowing the layout container, and you are allowing the hello world component, and you are allowing the text component to be added onto this responsive grid. Okay, so that is what is being said as part of the allowed components. Okay, so now if you scroll down to the items, so it starts listing down the experience fragment header. So this name is being mapped to this name. Okay, experience fragment header. Okay, and it has given the ID, right? And then inside this ID, it will give the actual data. Okay, so what is the experience fragment, what is the data layer, all that it is giving. Okay, if you see the text component, you will understand it better. Yeah, so if you see here, this is where the text component is starting. Okay, so again inside the items you have the text component, and rich text, this is true, and this is the text, actual text, hello world, right? So like this, it will send all this data, whatever is there as part of this model.json onto the Angular. So and everything will happen, that call will happen through this AEM page data resolver, and then AEM will send this entire JSON which we have seen here, which will contain all the components which are added here, and also what is the data inside that. If you observe here I have added the two text components, and I have these are actually the Angular components which are being rendered here. These are not AEM components, these are Angular components. But I'm able to do the responsive layout using the responsive grid. Okay, I can just adjust these layouts like this. Okay, I can just play around this with these layouts. Okay, using our out-of-the-box responsive grids. Okay, that is a feature which AEM is giving to us. So, so how does Angular know? So this how many grids it is occupying and everything, AEM is passing to the Angular just as a JSON, but the actual rendering is happening at the Angular end. Okay, we must distinguish between these two whenever you are working on the AEM SPA. You should always have in the mind that rendering of the page happens through Angular. So whatever adjustments you are doing as part of this, right, this adjustment of this layout containers, this you are doing it in AEM. Then that AEM, what it does, this configuration, whatever we have done, like the layout container adjustment, whatever we have done, it will pass it through as part of the JSON. Okay, how it will pass? Like inside the class names, if you see the text, it is saying here, this is the 5 column, right? And here you see this is from the sixth column. Okay, so it will start from 0 to 5 and 6 to 1, like full to the end. Okay, so that's how just AEM will put the data into the this model.json and pass it to our Angular code into this here. And it is the responsibility of the Angular page to actually understand all these classes and actually render it accordingly. Okay, so the rendering part is being done by the Angular. That has to be always in our mind. Okay, so now we have completed. So till now we have checked how the model is and what is the structure of the model and how it is getting passed into the Angular, right? Now once the Angular page are all these components are being loaded into the page, right? So then what should happen? This text component should actually get rendered, right? So this text component should actually get rendered by whom? Through Angular, right? So then Angular code should get triggered related to this component, right? What is the Angular code here for the text? So this is the text component. So if we open this TS file, right? So here it gets all this, whether it is rich text or not. Okay, so this one, whether it is rich text or not, and what is the text, actual text, right? This actual text, and then what is the item name. Okay, so all this it will get into here. So now the question is, how does this actually gets mapped? So now whatever we are seeing here is an Angular component, right? How does this Angular component map to this text component? Okay, so what I'm saying is, okay, so there are two components here. We should have it in the mind. So this dialog box is opening through the AEM component, and then the actual rendering of this hello world here is happening through the Angular component. So whatever data you have entered on this AEM component has to somehow pass through in the backend and come to this Angular, right? How does it come? So whenever you change this data, okay, let's say I put 4 exclamatories here and I save it. So where did I save it now? I first saved it onto AEM. Then what does AEM do? It will immediately update this JSON for me. So if I just refresh this JSON, I will have the updated JSON. And then this updated JSON will get passed on to this component. And this component will read this, and here it will render using the HTML page. Okay, the rendering happens always through Angular. So then this component, this AEM component, whatever is there on which we are adding this dialog box, should be mapped to this Angular component, right? Otherwise, how does it know that whenever I save the data, that data should be rendered by this Angular component? How does Angular know that? Okay, so that mapping, where is it defined? Okay, so that mapping, as I told, whenever you start the Angular module, here you are importing this one, right? Import components. So if you go to this import components configuration file, so here you see the import components, right? If I just open this import components, then here all the map tools are there. So here what we are saying is map to this one, Angular demo component navigation. This is the path of the AEM component. Okay, so this is the resource path of the AEM component, and we are saying this AEM component's resource path is mapped to this Angular component. Okay, like this you will see it for the text component too, and you can see here the text module text component is a bit complex. Okay, so here you see the text component, right? So like that you will map this resource type into the text component. Okay, it is a bit complex that you are going through all this. Like you see here lazy map to, you give here the resource type of the text component, and inside this you are calling this text edit config, and this text edit config maps to your component, which is Angular component. Okay, this is the text component which it maps to. Okay, that is how it is getting loaded. Okay, and then the data gets passed here. Okay, data gets passed into this component, and then it will come into all these inputs, and from here the rendering happens, and then UI will get updated. Okay, so this is the entire flow which is happening. So till now we have talked about the publish instance flow. Okay, so whenever you hit the URL, that URL will come to the dispatcher first, then the dispatcher will send the page, the blank page which will have a reference to the JavaScript of the Angular. Then the Angular gets loaded, then it goes to the routing, and then the routing will have all these routes which are defined here, all these routes. Then the AEM page matcher will get triggered, then it goes to the page matcher, and it will pass this path details to this page component, and before passing this path details, it will call this service, and this service will hit the AEM, and AEM will return this model.json to the Angular, and then both this path and this data, whatever is received, will be passed on to this page component. Then the page component will get all this path and data, and it will try to render these components, and while rendering these components, what it does is it will pass the data which it has got through this model service or model.json, and it will pass on the data onto the individual components, and that individual components will get loaded. And we have also seen how the mapping between this JSON component, like for example this is the text component, right, and this is the type. So to this type of the component, what is the Angular component which is the mapping component, that mapping has been done in this import constants using this lazy map to, and that is how the entire data will get passed on to this text component, and then the text component will render the text. So this is the flow until the publish instance, right? This is the flow for the publish instance. Okay, so now in the author instance what happens is we have something extra. Okay, so what is the extra here? This component, this Angular component, is also being wrapped by the AEM component, so that it gives an author the ability to actually select the authoring dialog box, right? So now how is AEM knowing that it has to wrap the component on top of this Angular component? So that happens again through the Angular response. Okay, so if I just inspect this one, right? So if I just inspect this, here it will send something called as data CQ data path. Okay, so this is the path which gives the exact reference to the exact component which is added. So if you see here, it is giving the a complete content path here, right? Slash content slash Angular demo and all that, right? So if you just go to CRX, like for example, if I just go to CRX DE, and if I just hit this, right? So this is the exact component path. Okay, so what is this path? This is the first hello world. If you are seeing that blue mark on this, right? You see here the blue mark will come. So that is the component path which is being referenced by the Angular code. How does the Angular code know? Again, it knows through the model.json. So it knows to the model.json, and while Angular is rendering the code, it will put this data CQ data path, and it will reference the entire exact path of this particular component into the code, okay, into this HTML code. Then what AEM does is it will read these tags. Okay, it will read these tags, and whenever you are opening it in the editor mode, AEM parses that HTML tags, and it will inject its own code. It will create a wrapper element using JavaScript. It will just create a wrapper element around this HTML, so that you will be given an opportunity to open the dialog box, okay, from here. Okay, so that's how AEM will locate the individual components, and then it will provide you an opportunity to enter the dialog box details, but the actual rendering will happen through the Angular. It is not happening through AEM. So it is just a wrapper component here. So again, if we go back to the this one, right? If we go back to the build process, and if you see here, if I just open this package.json, okay. So here we are doing the build process and calling this clientlib, right? And again, we saw this clientlib.config file. It is putting entire all this JS into this path. This is our clientlib directory path, right? So clientlib directory path. So what is the path here? Clientlib Angular, right? So then it goes to the clientlib Angular, and what are the category name here? What is the category name here? Angular demo.angular. That is the category name. So this is the folder name, and this is our category name. So now we have to load this JS into the page, right? AEM has to load this JS into the page. So where are we specifying that configuration? Okay, if you see onto the page code, right? Like for example, if I just go to this page path, and if I go to the JCR content, and if I go to the resource type, I copy this resource type, and then I go into apps here, and then I go to this page code, and if I open the custom footers here, okay, and if I inspect this code, so here you are loading the clientlib, okay, you are calling the clientlib.js here, okay, and you are loading the base here, okay, you are not loading the Angular code, right? If you see the category of our Angular code, it is Angular demo.angular, but what you are loading it on the page is Angular base, right? So then how is our Angular code getting loaded? Okay, so that is where we need to go into the template. Okay, so if I just click on edit template, so this is the template, right? So this template, this page, okay, this home page is based upon this SPA page template, right? And this is the structure of that template. So now in this template, if you just open the page policies or initial, if you go to the page policy, then inside this page policy, you will see the properties, and inside that you have clientlibs which have to be loaded, and here you load the Angular demo.angular. Okay, why are we doing this? Why are we not loading directly it here in the page code? Why should we load it through the template? It is because your Angular code might be there only for a specific particular page. Okay, so what it means is, in Angular you can create two page templates. So one page template will be a SPA page template which will load the actual SPA JavaScript, and there could be another page template which acts in a headful way as a normal AEM page. So these two together also you can do. So that is why we, instead of loading it on the page, because if you just directly load it onto the page, then what happens, every page template will call this page code, and every time that JavaScript gets loaded, and always it will be a single page, right? If you don't want that, and if you want to load single page on a specific page templates, then you will load it as part of these properties. So then what happens, whenever this page which is based on this template which loads this Angular code is loaded by the user, only then the Angular code gets triggered and it acts as a single page application. Otherwise it acts as a normal headful CMS. That's it for today, and I know I went pretty fast in this video. You might have to listen to this video again and again. I'll try to timeline this so that you can navigate to the timeline easily which you are interested in. Okay, but I would recommend you to go through this again and again to understand the entire flow. That's it for today. Thank you. Jai Hind.